All right, I think we've got enough participation. As the others straggle in, we'll address them as we see fit. Well, first and foremost, I'd like to welcome you to episode 2 of our Technology Truths webinar series. Today, we're going to discuss compliance versus security, relevant topics, obviously, in the face of what we're addressing in the industry today. But a couple of housekeeping items to get started. At any point in time throughout the discussion, feel free to use the Q&A toggle within your Ring Central control panel. Literally, it's listed as Q&A. And then there will be some interactive polling throughout. I'll announce those. So if there's any point in time you want to respond to those, simply respond to the pop-up window, or again, use the polls feature within that control panel as well. And then we'll have an open Q&A session at the end of the discussion for any type of questions that may arise along the way. So diving into the content, and the spirit behind these webinar series is really, there's a lot of noise in the industry right now, especially with the COVID-19 situation, and every manufacturer's product, service, or platform solves for that. And we know that that's just not the reality. But as we turn our attention to getting back to business, we wanted to equip our customer base and prospects and partners and the like with some information, some insights that we've gained along the way over these last 10 weeks, and really make it more meaningful level of engagement and insight. So diving in, joining me today will be Johnny Brister, who's the practice principal of our Protect practice here at Alchemy. My name is Jarrell Hall, the Chief Technology Officer, tasked with the technology vision and being the digital therapist to a lot of our strategic customers. And hopefully you guys are able to pull some meaningful content from our dialogue today, and take it back to your industries and your organizations. So for those that are not familiar, just a little bit of background on Alchemy. We're a national value-added reseller, really want to underscore that value and really have a business outcome-centric approach to our engagement with customers. But just south of 100 Alchemists, over 500 customers at this point, and really want to call your attention to the industry expertise there at the bottom. So when you talk about coming to market with a message and a strategy, having a roster assembled of former customers, lifelong consultants, career sellers, makes for a more holistic engagement model. And we really pride ourselves on that. So it's been well received in the market, and we look to do tremendous things moving forward. When you look at the strategy and really how we want to formulate our thoughts, most organizations have some type of transformation strategy. Digital transformation is probably one of the most overused buzzwords over the last 2 years. But most think of it in the form of silos: their identities, their devices, apps, content, networks, and operations. We really want to transform and look at those silos and make them into solutions. So the Alchemy concept is taking something ordinary and making it into something more extraordinary. So we are really focused on 3 main practices: our experience practice, which will be the series that we cover tomorrow, the protect practice, which is where we're focused today, and transform. So with that being said, I'd like to bring Johnny Brister into the conversation, really give you an understanding and outline of the protect practice and how we address the marketplace today. John?
Thank you, Joe. A little high-level overview of the protect practice. I'm going to start right there in the middle rather than work my way top to bottom. I do that because it's data protection, and really that's the way that the hackers and the bad actors, that's what they're after, is the data. So I'm going to start in the middle there. Here's where we look to help you, put in the necessary controls for the changes that you've seen happen today, or changes that are ongoing. Honestly, let's face it, the data, it lives on-prem and in the cloud. So the data protection solutions, they really need to provide controls that you can, span across both those environments. We also put a heavy focus on business email protection. It just continues to be the #1 way that data compromises happen. And when you look at how to protect the data and where the weaknesses lie, it tends to be on either side of that: workspace security and identity management. The workspace has changed even before COVID, but certainly now, that footprint has expanded out to homes and all kinds of places. And the way we need to protect them also needs to adapt to that change. Here's where we look at things like EDR tools, even rights management, and we even help our customers with their zero trust or least privilege initiatives. And on the bottom side of that, it's identity management. Really, identity is even more crucial today and than it has been ever in the past, both for security and efficiency reasons. You look at good hygiene here and layering in things such as multi-factor authentication, privilege access management, and overall governance. They really just become an essential part part of your security strategy to prevent account compromise and protect your organizations.
Oh, great dialogue there, John. So let's dive into the heart of the matter and why everybody's here. So compliance versus security, and that's an interesting phrase. For those that aren't aware of the true difference between that, John, can you give us kind of the high-level overview of how you interpret compliance versus security?
Sure. I think the main point of differentiation here, if I look at, kind of by the book, letter of the law type of definition, compliance we tend to look at as it's the things that you must do. It's kind of dictated by an entity like the government or, some other entity. Whereas security tends to be more around the things that you should be doing in order to protect your business. It doesn't have to be a versus scenario as we titled it, but a lot of times it's looked at in that vein. But today we're going to talk about a few of those items, but we're going to cover some ways to approach both in a unified way. So that way, not only do you, achieve the ultimate outcome and check both of those boxes, so to say, but you also do it in a unified way that's more efficient.
Great. Appreciate that context. And so as this pandemic situation has had a profound impact on business and personal lives, we've seen a lot of rhetoric, noise, propaganda, marketing, however you want to phrase it, out in the marketplace when it comes to what is really going on out there. So from your practice's perspective, what are some of the most overstated and understated concepts that are floating around out there?
This is certainly a fun one. I'll start out with the new normal and the Zoom meeting. Frankly, other than I'm just tired of hearing the phrases, I think there is some validity to putting it here. I think it's really important to stress that these really can't be reasons of acceptance for reduced security posture. So we can't think that way. So just because things have changed in a massive way, that doesn't really give us an excuse for relaxing our security efforts. If anything, we should probably double down on those efforts, because I will tell you that, certainly the hackers or the bad actors have, right? So we shouldn't use it as an excuse. Now look at the second item on there. IT and security teams were not prepared. Absolutely false. It's actually to the contrary. So literally everyone that I've spoken to, and it's been multiple, but everyone I've spoken to has actually said that their technology was in place and it held strong. They didn't have issues. More so, the lack of preparedness kind of stemmed around user training on the technology. That tended to be the larger issue. That along with the need to go out and potentially help people get set up at their home, or maybe they just needed some additional license for the rapid growth in numbers to support it. But obviously, 100% of the people that I talked to, their technology was good, right? So they were definitely prepared. Now there were certain little parts and pieces that, crept up and they had to adjust to, but technologically they were good to go. Third thing on there, another thing, we heard this early on, it was literally kind of explained as the end of the world, right? Everyone's just opening port 3389, which is, what's used for RDP. Simply not true. I talked to, the same customers that we've talked to, even doing other research on the internet, yet to find anyone that actually did this. I think this is just industry rhetoric to put out there, maybe an attempt to potentially sell some product or some services, but it probably does exist out there, but thankfully we haven't come across it along the way with any of our customers. Everyone was literally using some other secure method to proxy in their users for protection. Another thing I want to touch on is the notion that VPNs are a bad thing. Not true, right? So VPNs by nature, they're secure methods to access corporate networks, and they aren't inherently bad. I think what ends up being bad about them, Drill, is that the implementations are usually less than ideal from a security posture. So they lend themselves to some unsecure practices. I'll give you an example of that. The typical VPN deployment is usually put out in a way that allows user-based access, right? So what that means is any user that has access to make that connection can install a VPN client on any device. So that includes, maybe it's a hotel or a personal device, maybe it's grandma's PC, who knows? But I think the point there is that it's tied to the user and not a combination of the user and the device to ensure it's trusted. That in itself is definitely a bad part about VPNs. So it's more the implementation, not the technology. And another one that we heard is compliance and security are out, productivity is in. Again, simply not true. I think that while some industry regulations were indeed relaxed, one that stands out to me was HIPAA. Right, they actually relaxed the ability to accommodate virtual visits using Facebook video and FaceTime. While that definitely happened, most of the customers that we've spoken to opted not to go that route. In fact, they actually took the different route along the way. So one of the things that we talked about with several customers was they actually talked about the heightened awareness that is currently being placed on their security programs right now. Some of them even noted that the only area of current strategy that they're spending money is towards security. And that's just to ensure that their business stays safe. Not to rule out productivity being in. That's obviously important for all organizations. But I think the general theme of what we've seen is that compliance and security are still of utmost importance. And they've actually seen productivity go up with their employees. I think there was maybe a 1, 2, maybe 3 week period where there was some adjustment to what was going on. But after that, the word that we're getting is that productivity has been up amongst their employees.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So then we'll shift over to the understated side, things that we're hearing from our customers. First would be in the IT and security teams were the silent heroes. Absolutely true, right? I think not to take anything away from healthcare employees, nurses, doctors, anyone else that was out in the front lines being exposed to, potential COVID-related illnesses. But, IT and security behind the scenes just were super critical, keeping businesses running smoothly. I've heard some crazy stories about techs making personal visits to employees' homes to ensure they were all set up and able to work efficiently. So I think it's worth calling out that, unsung silent heroes, IT and security teams. Another understated, staff training to use technology. Absolutely true. I think this is the number one piece of feedback that we receive from our customers. Even one, and I'll give a quote here, even one saying that they felt like they had, ultimately failed their organization because they had so much technology, but longtime employees were completely unaware of it or even how to use it. So they felt like, that ultimately their lack of ability to effectively communicate and train their staff on how to use the technology was in place. They just felt like that was a failure on their part. Another one, the importance of policies and procedures, also true, right? Very much understated. These are the company's guide on operating, day-to-day business. And we've heard plenty of stories about, on the fly, quick rewrites of policies to adapt, even writing new policies, in flight amidst the changing conditions. So I think that, when you talk about something that's understated, the importance of those policies, how thorough they are and the ability to get them out in front of, your staff and your users definitely was understated. And another one is criticality of security tool integrations and automations, completely understated here. When you look at the amount of data and the amount of systems that generate activity, without these types of integrations and automation abilities, I think security teams would just simply drown in a sea of noise. So you couple that with major disruption in the operating environment and basically, for all intents and purposes, a brand new network, right, that they have to monitor. This initiative continues to be crucial for teams to maintain order in their houses. And then finally, and certainly not least, the role of identity program for business continuity. I think efficiency here and being able to simply add groups of employees on the fly for things like secure remote access or even additional employees to applications to potentially help cover the load due to furloughs and other things was crucial, for some that have already been down this route. Also, when you look at the ease of being able to extend the risk-based policies to protect applications and data, that was also very crucial. All these things can be automated or even a low touch versus the old way of having to manually add users to groups and then manually build out accounts inside of applications. All that's very, very inefficient, takes time. And time's one thing that, we just didn't have in the midst of all this.
Completely agree. And I'm going to kick out an Insta poll because we're always trying to formulate our messaging and our approach to the marketplace, just to understand what the actual security approach from the attendees was and what you feel is the best for your organization. So if you would complete that for me, and we'll gather results here on the back end. So John, moving forward, we're starting to see a lot of activity project-wise out in the real world today. Care to elaborate on where we're seeing the most impact in some of the focus areas?
Yeah, and I think here what we did is we try to take some actual engagements from actual initiatives that we're helping our customers with, and what you'll see is there's um, three main types of things that people are looking at. Consolidation for a couple of different various reasons, modernizing that identity access management platform, for some of those reasons that I just talked about, and then just overall mature their cybersecurity program. We've seen several of each of these along the way where people are just really trying to do the right thing, in dealing with what they're currently faced with. So for the first one, security tool consolidation, obviously, one of the projects that we helped somebody with, what they did is they looked at their current firewalls that they had in place and tried to leverage some of those additional features. They also wanted to use the same type of endpoint agent that was there, like the EDR agent, and make sure that they could integrate and talk to each other. And I think a big goal for all of them while doing this was integrating that stuff into their identity and email platforms. I think the overarching reason there is if your email platform knows about a potential threat or phishing email or something that came in, a user clicked on it, you've got that inside your identity program. Why wouldn't the two talk to each other, right? Email platform tell the identity platform that something bad has happened or is likely to happen. So let's do some step up MFA authentication, or maybe we'll even take the next step and disable that account just to prevent further spread or compromise those credentials. And next one, modernize that identity access management platform. Same thing there, right? People are just looking to protect themselves, implement adaptive MFA so they can really do some risk-based policies, just-in-time security. They were looking to do some full identity lifecycle management, even added in a sprinkle of API access management, just so that they could effectively manage both internal and external parties, because they were heavily reliant upon third parties for help managing certain systems. And then the last one on there, maturing the cybersecurity program. We talked about the policy stuff a little, a slide ago, but robust policy creation. But a couple customers wanted to apply, some of the new pandemic of things that happen into their policies, and they also needed to train their employees. So they're looking for, some updated tabletop exercises that include, new things that have happened or, new ideas of what might happen. And another thing that they looked to us for was just to have some security expertise on retainer.
Yeah, definitely seeing a lot of activity. And to touch on our poll real quick, it looks like 67% of the audience is risk-based focus. You got 11% that's doing a framework base, and then the rest of the poor souls are just being directed with no budget or funding there. So we've lived those lives, and we can help assure that. So on that note, very pragmatic approach that you kind of outlined some of these engagements and some of the overstated, understated. But the fact of the matter is the world has changed. Staffing levels have been impacted. Budgets have been impacted. A lot of our customer base are up against it. So that being the case, from a compliance and security perspective, what is the education moment for those dealing with, constrained budgets and or staffing levels?
It's the question. I'll hit a few areas here, and certainly there's probably others that exist, but I think about having to deal with the same priorities or new priorities, reduce staff, reduce budget, or lack of either or. One of the first things that I always like to look at is, let's inventory the current security tools that we have. And what we see, or what I've seen with people time and time again, is that, maybe they went multiple best of breed solutions to have in place, but honestly, those solutions are only doing probably about 60% of what they're capable of. When if you look at taking those three tools and consolidating them down to one, it can probably accomplish what all three are doing. Again, there. So it's an efficiency gain and also a financial gain, right? You're going to quit paying for three tools and three sets of potential hardware to run it on. Another one is to integrate those security tools, right? I like to consider platforms that, integrate and provide some immediate time to value. But if you look outside of that, API integrations are usually free, right? So I like to help guide people to exhaust all the free API integrations that make sense for you with your current tools, maximize those investments. One example, and I kind of talked about this earlier, is why shouldn't we as customers, of these products expect our email protection to be able to integrate to our identity platform, right? So we really want that level of integration so that things happen while we're sleeping, right? If a user all of a sudden becomes high risk, then let's apply some adaptive controls on the fly. Another one to look at, automate your security response. So I like to only advise people to look at SOAR tools after they look at, how they can do those integrations for free. But the SOAR industry is growing exponentially as people look to automate a lot of that different stuff that they have going on. And really, it's about real-time response and just keeping up with the amount of noise and input that comes to us. And another one there is align your security and compliance, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that as well. But think about that alignment, from your policies down, right? So pair up with those professionals that exist in the compliance department and put forth those strategies together. I'll give you a quick example. If you look at your policies, and let's just take, for example, maybe you're aligned to NIST and HIPAA. I have a healthcare background, so those are the ones that I used in my previous role. Policies were written in a way that referenced both of those, right? So it was always clear what we were trying to accomplish. If there was a policy to achieve something, we referenced both NIST and HIPAA. And that way we created a very circular program where we always knew what the end goal was. We paired up with our compliance team to do that. And I think it just made us overall more effective and more efficient whenever we were setting forth our strategic roadmaps. So another one is, scale and subscribe to security. So here, you want to talk about managed services a little bit, leverage them where appropriate to fill gaps, but they're typically subscription based, so they could be a great fit not only for changing financial models, but as well as providing the ability for security teams to accomplish, or to add additional capabilities that may be out of reach for various reasons. Maybe it's skill set, maybe it's geography, or it could be various things. But look at the various options that will help you increase the security posture, but they typically can allow you to maintain control of your overall budget.
Yeah, we definitely are seeing a shift to the OpEx model around a lot of subscribed IT services. So definitely can underscore that last component. So, as companies shift to getting back to business, a lot are starting from scratch. They're scraping, business continuity plans. They're trying to figure out kind of which way is up and how to get things back on the rails. When we look at priorities going forward, let's touch on some of those and really give our audience here some guidance on where to start and get back to work.
Yeah, so these are a few that we have, and I think we have a poll that'll come up, Joel will put out in a minute, but let's talk about a few that we have and what we've seen and talk with our customers. Evaluate and adjust your response plans, right? Sounds straightforward, but the reality is none of us got this 100% correct. I don't think anybody was expecting the global pandemic that happened. So I think it's important that we acknowledge, the gaps that were exposed and take the time to create adjustments. Incorporate the new operating environment into those plans, and then think through potential new circumstances that exist. I'll give you an example. If your company has everyone as remote, how do you operate if there's a large scale brownout, or maybe it's a large scale ISP outage and no one can connect? So there's just some things to think about, right? Those are, new potentials that, while they could have happened yesterday, today, I think that the overall impact is much greater if it did happen. Another one, uninstall or revert temporary work from home solutions. It's likely that maybe you had to install some trial software. Maybe it was installed during, in a bit of a haste during the transition just to get everyone up and working. Maybe you had to relax some local administrative rights, to give users the ability to do some things with those devices when they were at home. Now's a good time to relook at what happened or what you did, maybe remove those temporary solutions. I think ultimately, anything that's installed on the endpoint is only going to create a security risk because it's probably going to be excluded from your patching strategy going forward. So now's a good time to kind of look at what those things are and see if they make sense. If not, let's just remove them so you don't have to worry about patching them or any potential security holes later on. Another one, let's align the compliance and security objectives. So I referenced, I talked about crosswalks a little bit earlier, or I'll talk about crosswalks, but, you know, really, if you try to create that crosswalk between compliance and security objectives, you can utilize those to really, you can kind of check off multiple items on your roadmap simultaneously. Partner with the compliance team. Again, I think that makes a lot of sense. That way it's a joint effort. You understand where the two intersect, but more importantly, you can also understand when you're trying to achieve those objectives, how they affect the end users and ultimately the organization, right? We all know that a great security tool that's put in place that causes a lot of end user friction ultimately has a bad outcome, not only for the objective, but for the organization, just in productivity, among other things. And another one, I think it's time to kind of look at what the edge means now. This was something that was changing even pre-pandemic, but obviously it got fast-tracked tremendously throughout this. So it's not news really to say that the edge is being pushed out further from your traditional firewalls and into the cloud, even down to the users. So maybe it's time to investigate SASE, S-A-S-E, so it's Secure Access Service Edge. Let's investigate that and see what the benefits and protections that it can provide to your organization are. SASE really, it kind of converges a bunch of traditional technologies such as SD-WAN, secure web gateways, even CASBs, DNS security. There's a whole lot of things that they kind of converge into an all-in-one type solution. So I think redefining what that edge means for each organization, reassessing where you stand with it and how you move forward is a good idea. So another one is shift to the CARTA principles. So in a nutshell, CARTA it's basically the idea of continuous and risk-based trust assessment. Really the goal here is, I guess, strategically make security decisions that are based on risk and trust at the same time, while giving you the ability to continuously adapt to the context of what is learned from, I guess, each one of those interactions. So each connection, each authentication, whatever it might be. I think ultimately this ensures that the highest risk items on your list are always continuously being addressed first. First they're identified and then you're able to address them. Another one here is that identity, it's still paramount, right? It's still extremely important. I can't stress it enough. Account compromise still accounts. It's still, the reason for over 80% of reported breaches. So you get efficiency gains from it, being able to rapidly provision and deprovision access. That's extremely beneficial. And then also, talk about deprovisioning. That's a real-time or just-in-time security protection mechanism. So if you think about having remote workers now, if you're not able to effectively deprovision that access, they're still going to be able to connect in and do things if in the account that they leave the organization or maybe they're terminated. And then last thing we have on our list is let's take a look at segmentation. Let's kind of reinvigorate that segmentation strategy. I think network-based approaches are certainly still a good fit, but revisit them to include some contextual-based approach. And what I mean by that is it should include not just network, but the identity, the location, even the applications that are being accessed. So if you look at, can you tie a combination of those contextual things together and make a decision in real time, and that's ultimately a very secure way of doing things.
Yeah, and to the poll you mentioned earlier, we had an understanding of kind of how vulnerability was classified. So kicking out a poll right now, I'm interested in the feedback of how have you reclassified, or how do you classify your most vulnerable assets at this point, ahead of COVID and kind of where we were seeing the world shift. The borderless enterprise, right? Identity as the new perimeter, saw people being the most vulnerable asset. And then we've now seen shift back to data and then back to people. So I'll be interested in what the poll results are as they come in. So turning it and opening it up to some Q&A, Johnny, and reading one here that came in. Back to some of the things you call out work from home. Are you seeing customers start to select what phrases kind of the included product set over best of breed as an opportunity to reduce cost, even if it's an inferior product? And how would you respond to a customer asking you on guidance around that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so we're definitely seeing that, and we're seeing that people are trying to do it where it makes the most sense. Budgets and staffing are being heavily scrutinized. So I think people are being forced to potentially make a decision that, you know, may not be what they want or best of breed. I think what's important here to understand is that, you know, the potential risk this may create, but look at it in your overall defense in depth architecture. That way you can mitigate any potential exposure from not having, you know, what you feel is a best of breed. But we're definitely seeing it. I think we have a no vendor policy today, right? So there's an area, I'll just say it this way, Joe. There's an area, a particular vendor who is notorious for bundling things. But I think it warrants looking at which ones make the most sense and which ones can be utilized. And I think that, you know, if you're being forced to do it, it's okay. Just look at the mitigation steps to make sure that you're still overall protected.
Yeah, definitely. I know we've personally seen a couple of those come across. So reminder, you can submit your Q&As by clicking the Q&A button up there, just typing it into the chat. Another one, Johnny, is any new technology or approaches or threats that are targeting work from home use cases that you're seeing?
That's a really good question. I spent a good bit of time, you know, researching are there new mechanisms or new things happening here. And the ultimate answer that I got from it is not really, right? So I think that what it lends itself to is that hackers are lazy, right? They're going to continue to do what works, and you know they've adapted their phishing messaging to include COVID-related things. You know, they're upping the magnitude of it, but the underlying technology of you know how they're doing the phishing or how they're attempting to breach networks or gain access to data, it really hasn't changed, which I think is telling, right? It tells us that, I'm looking at the poll right now too for, you know, what people feel is the most vulnerable asset. Not surprising, it's people, right? And so if we think like an attacker, you know, they're thinking the same thing. What's most vulnerable? It's the people, and that's what they're going after. So nothing really earth-shattering or new from a technology perspective. Same old, they're just changing the messaging and upping, you know, the quantity.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it looks like people has been declared the winner, which is very, very in line with our messaging for most of our customers at this point. From a training perspective, from a threat vector perspective, and just a touch. I think we're finding some alliance there. So any other questions, Q&A? Let me look over here and make sure there's nothing that came in. Okay, so shifting into, I'll give you the floor for a second, Johnny. Final thoughts as we kind of see, you know, the world get back to business and security professionals alike start to refocus and re-engineer the second half of this year and beyond. Any parting thought there?
Yeah, I think so. And I've mentioned this probably a couple of times, but I think overall you'll be more successful if you don't think of it as compliance versus security. They're pretty much joined at the hip, right? You need to accomplish both. Some are, you know, in the compliance realm, we're going to be, we have to do, so we're going to go do, versus security, we need to do and we should do, right? That's the differentiator. But I highly suggest that you partner with those peers that are in that space, create that unified strategy. That way you can achieve both really with as little effort and as, you know, more importantly, as little end user friction along the way. So maybe don't think of it as the two against each other, but how do you join them together and really create that approach that makes you successful in the end?
Excellent. Thanks, sir. And again, I appreciate all the attendees participating in today's webinar. I want to call your attention to, from an information sharing perspective, we are always publishing artifacts, blogs, how-tos on our Alchemy website. Here are 3 examples here. But definitely, if there's any follow-up that you have, please feel free to reach out to your Alchemy account executive or email us at the address there at the bottom right. Other than that, I appreciate you joining. Hopefully you were able to gather a little bit of insights to take back to your organization and or further your security posture. Thank you. Have a great day.